I have that voice. I can go, whoa. Welcome, mate. Come and sit down, enjoy yourself. Everybody, welcome to the Hard Hat Comedy Club Open Mic Night. So everybody's name has been put in a hat, and you're all going to get like 5 minutes up here to tell your jokes and experiences. This is not the right audience. Oh no, it's a Safety Differently Book Club! Woo! All right, everybody, for those that don't know me, my name's Steve Harvey, not to be confused with that American guy on the telly. All right. And this is Josh Bryant. He does all this amazing technical stuff. So I suppose, like, before we kick, what a year we've had, by the way. I'm telling you, it's been amazing. So a few thank yous. I've had to write them down because I'll forget them. Because I've just, like, I always forget stuff. And then at the end, I'm like, oh, I should have said that. But firstly, I want to thank Karen for fronting up the money and allowing us for having a great night. Well done, Karen, from Belisif Consulting. But also, seeing as we're recording now, it'd be remiss of me not to thank everybody who's stepped up over the past year. We have done some cool stuff, man. Honestly, it's been amazing. All right, I want to thank all the guests for this year as well, which has just been amazing. Josh Hoover. Oh, so we had a look at this, Clive. This is what you sent me today. So that's how quick that we act. We're fast on the dial. We are. So Clive sent me this today, saying, "Oh, look at this! Look, Tim's book's ahead of me, which we'll show in a minute." But this year we've had a lot of these guys come and talk to us, which is pretty amazing. So good for the new year. I'm trying to get the guy who's got the forklift checklist book. So he'll be coming up in February or March. All right. For some reason, he's kept himself anonymous, but I'll fucking find you. All right. But amazing. I tell you what, you can't complain. We've had some really amazing people. Like last month, we had Professor Decker come in. Who else? Gareth Locke, Georgina, Greg Smith, Ron and Ray, Ben. You know, just amazing. So, and they've been such brilliant sports, and we're really grateful for them coming along and spending some time with us. I really want to thank this pub because it's a spiritual home of spirits. The spiritual home of spirits. And I tell you what, we can't, like, $8 pints, I guess. Is it $8 pints? You can't argue that, right? And half price beers the whole night. So we can't go wrong with there. But last, but certainly not least, I want to thank all of you guys. Come on. Is this thing on? For coming along and sharing your stories and being such amazing sports. It's been brilliant to have you here. And yeah, we have such amazing fun doing this. It's a bit stressful in the beginning, but once this is all over and we can have a few beers with you, it's brilliant. So we have amazing fun. Just to let you know, this is a little plug for me. I think some of you know that I've been the victim of a restructure. So I've got I need a new job come January. So if anybody's looking, if anybody needs somebody, I'm available. All right? I don't need references, mate. I've got everybody. Can you edit that out, please?
I'll do my best.
Yes, just in case that's not what I really think. But I am looking for a job. So, but I've got my own business too. So if people are wanting anything, I am teaching people comedy skills too. So if you want that, I'm not very funny, but I need some cash. But I've got 2 dash hounds and a mortgage. So we need to do that. I suppose it's time to introduce our latest victim. What a legend. Oh, sorry. Clive.
Best-selling.
The best-selling author above some other guy who used to be a cricketer. So that's how easy it is to get into safety. You can do cricket and then bloody end up in safety. So, #1 selling author, Tim Darth. I've just ripped up my questions.
Thanks, Steve. That's
Nobody's mate. No, it's what a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Clive, for sharing that photo, mate.
Yeah, totally. All right, mate. So I had a glance at your book the other day, and one of the things that I noticed is that you came off the tool. You're basically been a frontline worker, and I would love to know a wee bit more about you, but also just your experiences with safety people in the past. And I just wonder if anybody can relate to this stuff, and if you see yourself, it might be time to look a bit deeper.
Sure. All right. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I did come up on the tools. So I, out of school, jumped on to, I ran a landscaping business for a couple of years, doing swimming pools and that sort of thing. But then I swiftly moved from Victoria over to Perth and jumped on the FIFO gravy train over there. So I was doing all sorts of roles from, roustabout on offshore oil rigs to excavator operator, working the mining, concreting, rigging, all that sort of stuff. So basically for about 5 or 6 years, I was in that sort of industry. And my interactions with safety, that was my introduction to safety professionals. I didn't know that was a thing until I started working FIFO for clients like BHP and Chevron and the other big wigs. But my introduction to the safety profession wasn't fantastic. I didn't hold them in the highest regard. So I would join the pre-starts and the toolbox meetings, and I'd put up with the unsolicited advice around how to hold a handrail when I'm walking downstairs and all that sort of thing. But I became quite cynical of safety pretty early on. Yeah, quite disengaged. Fought it for a long time. Fought it for about a decade, and then thought, you know what, there's an opportunity here to try to introduce, this practicality.
So are you saying that holding a handrail is not good advice?
Well, I remember being on an offshore oil rig, and there was this thing. It was the trailing hand. 3 points of contact, and all the supervisors will always say 3 points of contact, and I'd freeze because I'd literally think about it. Well, okay, 1, 2, 3, and I couldn't move. So I struggled with that for a while. I kept my job for a little bit, which was good. But I just saw what the safety industry was trying to do and what they were. I understood it. I wasn't subscribing to it. I wasn't buying it. I just thought the way they were doing it was not that fantastic. So, yeah.
Well, I have to tell you this quick story. I had an interaction with a guy. He was telling me about holding the handrail and all that sort of stuff, and he says 3 points of contact. I said, I'm going to take him. I'm going to have a crack at this. And I said, how can I have 3 points of contact if I'm moving up? Your eyes, Steve. Your eyes are the third and fourth point of contact. And I was like, I'm beat. I've got nothing for you. Well done, you're gone. Mate, the book itself, I kind of wonder if it was a labour of love, and would you like to punch the person in the head that sort of drove you to write the book?
I've got a safety coach in my corner, the great Clive Lloyd. I've known Clive for a long, long time. Worked with him, I think, maybe 2012, 2013 for the first time. I went to one of his conferences in Sydney, and I was that pest in the back that just wouldn't shut up and wouldn't stop asking questions. And I think in his foreword, he reflects on that he was just trying to go and have a smoke. And I was just there tugging at his sleeve, asking him questions about all this amazing stuff. So it was actually fast forward a bit over a decade, and I've always kept in touch with Clive. But it was Clive who really encouraged me to put something down in writing. I haven't been terribly prolific on LinkedIn in the past, and he's always been in my corner. And when I saw an email come in one day, CCing his publisher and introducing his publisher to me, I thought there's no turning back from this point. But it's been great. It was really good. That's how I wrote the book. And once I got into it, I really enjoyed it. I figured out that I had a bit more to say than what I thought. I thought I summed it all up in the foreword to Clive's book. I remember writing that and thinking, I've done it.
That was easy.
I've said it. But I had a bit more to say. So.
Did you find it quite therapeutic, Tim, when you were writing it? Or were you getting angry?
Well, it depends how my day job was going. I had to sort of monitor that. So I was still working, obviously, and if I had a bit of a tough week or maybe some tough interactions, I'd have to be careful not to go and start writing. So I had to be measured there. But yeah, I did find it was a good outlet. It was good. I'd definitely encourage anyone to write. It's great.
Well, let's face it, if Clive can write a book, then it's pretty much open slather for everybody, including Dave up the back there. Yeah. Like, who doesn't like the pickle in a burger? Hamburger, I should say that. Oh, Kieran, you're the only one.
You're all wrong.
Yeah. No, but look, Tim, when I was reading the book, you had this beautiful metaphor or analogy about hamburgers and the safety profession. I wonder if you can share that with us.
Yeah, I think the analogy went around sort of connecting, safety is the unwanted sort of pickle that's tossed out of a burger. I don't know what I was, where my head was at then, but maybe I just had a burger and enjoyed the pickle. But I subscribe to the pickle personally. I think that the pickle's got a very unique, distinct flavour. I think burgers that don't have a pickle don't feel right to me. So the connection I was trying to draw there was that I think that in the corporate burger, I think that people, our workers, the humans who are closest to the worker, often discarded like a undervalued pickle in a burger. So that's the analogy, and I am an advocate for bringing the pickle back.
Make the pickle great again.
Yeah,
or is that too soon, is it? Is it probably a wee bit too soon, is it? Yeah, totally. But mate, I think probably all of us can feel like I know what it's like to be the pickle.
Can you guys just raise your voices?
Oh.
No one can hear you.
All right. Go on.
I was talking about a pickle.
That's better.
Yeah.
He was talking about a pickle in a burger. No, I normally have pickles in kebabs and stuff like that, right? But mate, another thing that I picked up when we were talking about the book, you sort of said, so obviously this is Safety Differently Book Club, and a lot of people get a bit animated and excited about the traditional approaches to safety, which we kind of need, and you talked about that, not discarding the stuff that we've learned before. Again, I just wonder if you could sort of maybe elaborate on some of those things that are really helpful, and we shouldn't look to move them on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't. I can hear myself now. I don't subscribe to a particular model or philosophy. I try to take a bit more of an eclectic approach to it. But yeah, I think there's gold to be found in all the different safety models, in my opinion. I think that we've got the advantage of traditional safety approaches. They've got years and years of studies and research behind them. There's plenty of elements in them that work for me in the context of the organisations that I partner with, and there's also plenty of elements that I don't spend a lot of time and energy on as well. But it goes the same. It's the same thing for Safety Differently, Safety 2, HOP. For me, it's more about just trying to figure out what meets the needs of the organisation in the context of the work that it does. So it's like having too many tools in your toolkit. I think it can make it harder to sort of find the one you need. And for me, it's just about chewing the meat and spitting out the bones, figuring out what works at certain times. And I find myself sort of moving in and out of different models along the way. But I would caution, personally, I would caution anyone from getting, I guess, investing too much in one model and discarding the others, because I think that, along my journey, at least anyway, with the organisations I've worked, I've found myself sidestepping from model to model, philosophy to philosophy. So.
I think back to when Greg Smith was here, and we were lucky enough we had that day workshop with him in Brisbane, and he talked about doing more with less, and that sort of always stuck with me. Like, we do all this stuff just in the name of safety, and every single person who works in an organisation will know exactly what I'm talking about, where we just do this stuff, and it's like, why the hell are we doing it? So Greg really influenced me when he was talking about this. But that's easier said than done when you go into these organisations with like some leaders who just that's all they know. And talking about leaders, what can we do? How can we start talking to our leaders and start to get them to think about some of these progressive approaches and look at safety in a different way?
Yeah, I think part of it is dropping the labels. So I learned earlier on that if I walk into an exec group or a boardroom and start dropping safety differently, safety two, all these terms that can frighten the leaders of an organisation, because it's it's change, it's radical, and quite often these directors sit on multiple boards, and they've got their comfort spaces as well. So even by dropping the labels but still doing the work behind them, I think it can take you a long way, and it doesn't frighten off our leaders as well. And I think safety professionals I think it's a privilege to be a safety professional, to be a safety leader. I think it's responsibility comes with privilege, and part of that responsibility is bringing the worker's voice to the executive room. And I believe the best way to do that is to pick the elements of these, the safety buffet, if you like, that fits the context of the organisation, and give them a voice in the boardroom, and just advocate for them, but without the labels, because labels are scary.
Well, I want to touch on labels as well, but I want to talk about the breakfast buffet of safety, because and hopefully it includes a hash brown and a bit of black pudding and stuff like that. But mate, you talk about the names, and I know Josh and I have spoke about this, and I've definitely experienced this, where you start saying, oh, let's talk about safety differently, or safety 2, or HOP, and you can start to see people go, what the hell, what are we doing? That must mean that we've been doing stuff wrong for all these years, and it actually does scare people. I've had that heaps, and I would say, no, you're just ready for your next iteration of safety. That's what we want to do. But try and tell people that, they get a bit excited as well. So you're right about the buzzwords, and you just, I don't know. Are we going to get rid of them? I don't know. I think we'll just keep going. I've definitely tried to stop using safety differently HOP, and I've spoke to Josh about the safety differently Bookclub. We should change it to something else, like a bunch of clowns, or like yeah, we do have to get new shirts. Yeah, we would have to get it. But mate, one of the things, and I've seen this a couple of times now, and there's not many people doing it, defining safety. I kind of wonder if you could talk to us about, I know that you've put a model in, and you gave some practical tips on how to do that. Just wonder if you could talk through those practical tips and share the reason why you would want to define it.
Yeah, sure. So it actually took me a few years to sort of take a step back and realise that a lot of the work that I'm doing, along with other safety professionals in the safety space, I'm striving towards this condition of safety, if you like, but without a clear understanding of, or a definition of, what safety is. And I think that safety is a bit of a nebulous concept anyway. There isn't a clear universal definition for it, and I think with good reason. But for me, I had this point where I realised that, okay, safety hooks into our corporate strategy. It's not a standalone strategy, but everything else in our corporate strategy had clear definitions around our goals for the customer, for marketing, financial, all the rest of it. But when it came to safety, there was nothing defined. What does safety mean in the context of this organisation? And I think that's, for me, it's a sensible starting point. Joining an organisation and undertaking an exercise, grabbing a cohort of workers, middle management, senior management, and asking that question: what's safety mean here? What does good safety look like? What does bad safety look like? Let's try to define it, because we can't work towards a goal unless we have a good definition of what success looks like. So I think that, for me, defining organisation is a very critical first step in a safety journey, and it's not something that a safety team can do themselves, or a management team. It's a bigger organisation, a bigger exercise with the whole organisation.
So you've obviously done that before, mate. A lot of success. The people get involved, like particularly the people who do the work, so to speak. Is that something? Do they like to be part of that experience?
Yeah. My experience is that yes. So it can be fun. It can be. I find it fun and interesting. So I'll go and talk to some shop floor workers, talk to them about what safety is and isn't, and get their perceptions, their views on it. Do the same at different levels of the organisation, and then take that to the executive table. Ask them the same question. Give them a bit of thinking time, obviously. But the fun comes when we sort of unpack that and we look at different areas and pockets of the business have different perceptions of safety, different attitudes, different lived experiences, and trying to put them all together and come up with a definition that kind of suits everyone's needs is really, really tricky. But what it does, it highlights different areas of the business that value safety to different extents or understand it differently. And I think I guess that leans into, my theory that safety is a social construct, and it's not something that can be, realised by the workforce through audits and inspections. It's those lived experience, those perceptions, attitudes, and trying to consolidate them into a definition is tricky, but it's a great exercise and something that helps an organisation realise the different approaches to safety that different areas of the business have. And if we hadn't have undertaken that exercise, we wouldn't have, stumbled across those learnings.
No, that's amazing. Mate, you talked about the social constructs and all that sort of thing. One of the questions that I put down there was around, you talked about these I think it was 5 models or 5 psychology theories or whatever it was. And it got me thinking, it's probably something that maybe we don't do a lot of, understanding the psychology of safety. I know I learned heaps from Clive when I done some when I met up with him, and it was just amazing, and it's influenced me a lot. Wonder again about, how should we embrace the psychology of safety?
Yeah, I mean, it's a simple question, a simple answer. It's not at all. It's so loaded. I became intrigued through Clive as well with this sort of work. So the 5 psychology perspectives, I think that in the book I talk about how we can relate them to safety and how we can sort of use them similar to the multiple safety models, looking at I guess the theories behind these perspectives and what they mean in the context of how our workers sort of behave. But it's not so much how they behave, it's what sits underneath that. It's the attitudes and the perceptions and the shared experiences and lived experiences that inform those behaviours that I think that the safety professionals really need to get underneath the hood of and understand those. So as Clive famously says in his book, behaviours aren't the problem, they're an expression of the problem. And I think that's just gold. For me, that really prompted me to sort of look underneath that and see the value in the psychology of human behaviour.
Mate, I'm going to pull you out again for this. I remember you talking about the lazy brain, and I use that constantly. Now, whenever I hear somebody talk about complacency or laziness, unbelievably, you still hear people talking like that. They're still saying they're complacent, or I can't believe it. So anytime I hear about that, I just talk. But that's just part of the human experience. That's a lazy brain, and it's a great conversation to have. Some people just don't get it. So it's definitely, I have a big interest in the psychology of safety, and I know Dave has some brilliant stuff on it too. All right, over to you lot. We've got a couple of books to give away. Tim's actually brought a couple for us, so mate, you've got to listen carefully because you are going to have to judge the winners. All right. Shet, on you go, mate. Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm intrigued by you and Clive with the lazy brain, kind of. I don't want to call it incomplacency, but what I've experiencing, and I think we all have, and it doesn't seem to stop, is what I like to call the jackass, stubborn mule complacency, especially when you inherently take on a role that the person you're working with once held at a lesser level and breaches every possible safety thing you can imagine. How do you guys, in your safety excellence, prescribe managing that sort of behavior where you can kind of identify, well, is he just being stubborn? Is she just being a bitch? Or is this a thing? How do I manage this? I ask this because we're humans in this whole cog and spoke too. We know what we know. Asbestos is asbestos, electrical is electrical, water is water. The hazards and risks are always the same no matter what industry or sector we go to. It's the people in it and how they react to these things that make or break our jobs. But in that job, we also have to be resilient to not want to do what you want to do, Steve, and punch them in the face. So I guess what I'm asking is, how do you decipher humanizing safety? How do you identify it? How do you manage it through managing yourself while you're managing it? Does that make sense? It's a threefold question, so I get a book.
Yeah, sure. I mean, is it on?
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Stay on.
I'll have a crack at it. Well, I mean, I think in that example that you give, like for me, initially, there's a behaviour being exhibited there, and it's a repeat behaviour. So there's something behind that for me. That could be a dynamic to do with the subculture in that group. It could be something going on in that person's personal life or their work life. But whatever it is, there's a story there. And safety is, a lot of safety is about storytelling and listening to sort of learn. So for me, if I came across that situation, I'd be immediately trying to understand what's happening. So what's happening in this person's world that's resulting in this, what do you call it, complacence, lazy jackass? Lazy jackass, digging his heels in, doesn't want to, that one. Doesn't want to play. Yeah, so there's some, yeah. So there's something there, and there's something there that I would try to explore and I'd want to understand a bit more. And sure, there's going to come a point in time potentially if that behaviour doesn't change and there's an attitude there that can't be influenced, and you know the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions that sit behind it can't be realigned or reframed, then sure that might go down a different path where you know there's another very different conversation. But I think the opportunity for safety professionals there is to hone in on that. There's a story, there's something happening underneath this behaviour. What is it? Let's use our interpersonal skills to get under that and try to identify it.
Because the underlying current, I think we all know, is the 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 other people that are watching on that were also responsible for their safety, are not watching their behavior because they just accept that he's just a jerk. They're watching us and how we're going to manage it, because then they're going to see how we're managing them as well. So that's where it becomes a bit tricky.
Yeah, no, it is tricky. I was a version of that person when I was on the tools, and I'm aware that I've got a bias there buried that sometimes surfaces as well. So part of it is checking yourself as well, and being aware of your own biases and not playing into them. It can be tricky. You got to pick your day, pick your moment.
All right, who have we got next? Peter, listen.
Here you go, my friend. I can project pretty well too. Excellent, Tim. Thank you. The question I got was from the sponsors tonight. Just dropping that in there. But was there a single event that triggered and turned the switch on for you to safety, or do you think it came gradually over time? And do you think that the four-step approach will change people in that process, or do you think that you do kind of need that light bulb moment to be kicked off?
I don't think you need the light bulb moment. Yes, there was a moment for me. So towards the end of my FIFO work, probably the last 2 years, I was a injury relief worker on the offshore oil rigs up on the northwest shelf. So I had work when people were severely injured and they couldn't perform their 3-week shift on the rig. And I always had work. So about a year into that, I might turn up on an oil rig, and that would be the first time I'd meet the crew I'm working with. And you know, Jono's not there because he lost 2 fingers the swing before, or drill pipe rolled onto Ben's leg, and he doesn't he's got to take a year off work. So I had work all the time, and that for me was the light bulb moment when I thought, well, hang on, I can reinvest the negative energy that I have towards the safety profession, turn that into something a bit more positive, and use my experiences to try to change this. I shouldn't have had work. I don't think that I should have just gone off a swing and said to my girlfriend at the time that I'll be right, in 3 weeks I'll have another roster. So I think I did have a light bulb moment, but the 4-step approach for me, it's not freezing the ocean. It's nothing groundbreaking. It's getting to know your people was the thing that was missing for me. So my interactions with safety professionals largely were they wouldn't even try to understand the worker and what the worker does and the variable nature of the work they do. And for me, that was the starting point. It's pretty simple. Just take a bit of time and energy to know your people, and then from there, everything else comes through that. So, yeah.
Cool. Any other final? Kieran, on you go. One more. Shep took too much time.
Trying to keep this one a bit short. Out of curiosity, you were talking about the frontline worker who's got potentially that resistance to the traditional safety profession. Have you any tips for approaching that mid to senior level person who has that resistance to the safety profession when the cold-faced workers are on board? The senior people above them are on board, but that person in the middle is got a lot of seniority, a lot of direction and control over things. Any tips for approaching that conversation to begin with?
Yeah, that's a good one. It can be really challenging. That's your one, mate.
Speak loud, bro.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I think there's a lot of attention that's put on senior management and the workforce in the context of safety. So our senior managers take on a lot, our frontline workers take on a lot, but I think there's a conversation to be had with mid-management because they inherit work from upstream and downstream, and a lot of the time there's competing priorities there and something's got to give. So I think I've stumbled across these people in mid-management who are quite influential and quite oppositional to safety. And again, there's something behind that. There's some experiences there that's informed that that state of mind, that position. So it can be tricky, but I do talk about in the book the importance of forming a safety coalition. And I found a lot of success in this when I joined an organisation, just spending time out in the field, not even in a safety context, just spending time out there watching, interacting with work groups, and you identify pretty quickly who the influential people are in different teams, those people that have their colleagues' ears. And by watching, observing and making a bit of list of those people, getting them on side, I can expand my small safety team of 5 or 6 people to 20, 30, 40. And then it becomes a lot easier to bring these oppositional mid-managers on side because there's a movement, there's a groundswell there. So I think to answer that, it would be I would invest in the right sort of people, invest in the influences, and eventually that's going to overcome the people that stand in the way.
Mate, I'm going to stay on the 4th step to humanising safety. I've got that down as one of the questions, and I'm glad that Pete's here actually, because I was thinking when I read this book, I was thinking of you because do you remember you and I had done some work out at Pinkenba, and I'll never forget this. Peter said to me, "How come you know everybody's name?" I was like, that's just, I think that's just normal. I thought that was just a normal thing, but according to Pete, it wasn't. Like safety people generally don't know, and they didn't have their names on their shirts or anything like that, but that was a deliberate thing. I used to, every Tuesday morning, you're probably still doing them, Pete, all those meetings at the toolbox meetings and all that were happening, I would be there 7 o'clock, 10:30, 2 o'clock every single time to get to know all those guys. That was my whole day. So that's one of the steps that you have, get to know your people. And what advice do you have for safety teams to get to know their people?
It's a challenge for me. I'm terrible with names, and so this is a real paradox, a contradiction for me. So I bang on about getting to know your people, and I forget their names instantly. So, and that can be a problem when I go back on site and try to pick up the conversation again. So it's a little bit prehistoric, but what I've done in the past is repeated that name in my head, and when the conversation is finished, I get my notepad out, I write a couple of notes about who the person is, 1 or 2 things that we spoke about, so that I can prime myself for the next conversation, because I can't seem to help myself. I can't seem to improve with my short-term memory. It's something I practice and something that I'm not getting better at. So I've got to find hacks around it. But it's terribly important, because if I call everyone mate, they pretty quickly feel undervalued and not heard. So it can be a real challenge, and it still is a real challenge for me, Gary.
Thanks for that, Clive. But mate, I totally agree. I'm a nightmare for names as well. Actually, I keep forgetting everybody's name apart from Yop, because I only know Yop because he came in late, and he's getting a warning for that. But I won't get the book and read the rest of the 4 steps. I promise you, when you read it, you're like, oh man, this stuff's simple, but for some reason it's not. So that good tips on remembering people's names, because I'm a nightmare too. I just try, and it's not too bad at the current place I work because I've got their shirts on, but in some other places I've had to do that same thing, repeat, go back and write or talk, or else I just flat out ask them. Like the guy Peter today who looks after us, I was just like, I forgot your name, mate. And he was like, Peter. I was like, thank you. Mate, a couple more questions, then we're going to finish up. But I really love this quote that you had in your book: poke the system and it will reveal itself to you. So you talk about building a healthier relationship with failure. Just wondering if you can elaborate a wee bit more on that for us.
Yeah, I think that it's funny because we learn from our mistakes. So we learn from failure, and that's what we tell our kids and all the rest of it. But there's this stigma around failure that results in people not wanting to own it in a work context quite a lot, and therefore, paradoxically, we don't learn from our mistakes. So there's a lot in that. There's a lot around the stigma of failure and how that stifles our learning opportunities. And I don't need to, with this group, I don't need to sort of get into that whole conversation about learning from successes versus learning from failures. You're all well across that. But I think for me, poking the system, it's a Dave Snowden quote, but that's just about setting up safe to fail experiments. So understanding what systems are predisposed to do and what they're not predisposed to do, and setting up experiments so that we can poke the system, test the system in safe to fail environments so that we actually learn what it can do, what it can't do, and improve it through non-events, essentially, not waiting for things to go wrong. But I think the framing around failure is a problem. It's a risk, and for me, there's the attachment of perfectionism. Sorry. So with failure, but for me, it's more about looking at it through the lens of error correction and error response. So when something does go wrong, how we respond to that, rather than just taking this black and white approach to perfectionism, like zero harm and these other sort of mantras that allow out no space for deviation.
Actually, mate, I want to talk a wee bit to that too. Actually, it's something I really struggle with. We do expect perfectionism, unfortunately, and we still do. And it doesn't matter how many conversations you have. But something that I talk about is I think I said earlier, I've got 2 dachshunds and 2 teenagers. Like we can't go through a day or two without something going wrong. So that's the way I talk about that. If I'm in work and say, these guys are doing work every single day, how can you expect nothing to happen? They're doing this for 10, 12 hours. Whereas I've got 2 teenagers and 2 dachshunds, and we have something going wrong all the time. So I try and reframe it that way and talk through it. Mate, this has been amazing. Now, you might notice we've deliberately got the surfy sort of picture up there for Tim. You're a very keen surfer, aren't you, mate? Is that? You were trying to go for a surf today?
Keen, but not necessarily good at it.
Yeah, it's awesome. But mate, one thing I also know about you is you play the guitar. So if you had an opportunity to play with any musician except Clive Lloyd, what artist would you play with, and what song would you belt out?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think from a guitar perspective, probably John Frusciante from the Chili Peppers. Love his guitar, but favourite band's Pearl Jam. Going to their gig next week. But if I could get John and Eddie together, then I think that would be the best.
All right, mate. So what's your guilty pleasure dance song? What's the song that's going to get you on the dance floor?
All right. Dance floors.
You're nice and safe here, mate. We'll edit this bit out.
Yeah, no, that's I'm sure you will. I grew up, so my vintage is grunge music, right? And it doesn't go that well on dance floors. It looks depressing and quite sad. But that said, I'm pretty sure next week, if Pearl Jam played Black, then I'll be on the dance floor looking depressed and sad, but having the time of my life.
Everybody, the amazing countdown.